we'll be having a workshop followed by three short presentations. I'll be the chair for these next sessions. Vicky and Sarah Honeychurch kindly asked me to join, so I'm hosting the session. So the first workshop I see is Being, Belonging and Becoming workshop by Jamie Haywood from Anglia Ruskin University, using creative reflection methods to foster active learning. So workshop for 45 minutes, followed by three separate presentations. So Jamie, if you'd like to see if I need to give you permissions. Oh, you're already a co-host, so go ahead.
Great, thank you, Dustin. Really appreciate it. And hi, everybody. Really nice to be here today. And hi again to everyone who was in the parallel session B. I'm on the other side now, so I was chairing, and I'm on the presenter side. So I'll just share my screen. If you bear with me for 2 seconds. Okay, there we go. So that should be coming up in a second. Okay, so yeah, really big welcome to everybody today. This workshop's all around using creative reflection methods to foster active learning. So my name is Jamie Haywood. I'm from Anglia Ruskin University, and we have an optional check-in. If you'd like to have a look at the various cats on the image, and if you would like to add to the chat which one you are today. So how are you feeling today? If you want to add why as well, that would be fantastic. If you want to add where you're joining from as well, that would be lovely if we could add some on the chat. I know we had a heat wave in the UK for the last couple of days, so I think I've been definitely a 7 on there for a couple of days. But yes, we've got some great ones coming in here. So yeah, a lot of people going for 6, which is good. That looks quite an excitable one, doesn't it? We've got a few who are joining me on the 5 and the 7, who's yeah, a little bit exhausted. So yeah, fantastic. So feel free to keep adding these in as well. So yeah, I really like this as a really quick kind of check-in activity. I always think it works really well with my groups and people I work with. So yeah, we'll make a start. So very quick bit about myself. So like I said, my name is Jamie. Thank you very much for joining today. I work as an academic developer at Anglia Ruskin University, which is based in Cambridge. Sorry, I'm based in Cambridge. We have campuses, we have a few campuses, and I'm very lucky to work with staff across the university to support educational development. So I'm a teacher at heart. I've spent the last 9 years teaching in HE and FE, so higher education and further education. And then I presented an escape room workshop at the Active Learning Conference, well, the Global Festival last year, so it's really good to be back presenting. So a very quick outline of the workshop today. So as a group, we're going to be exploring creative reflection methods, which can be used to promote and foster active learning. So we're going to try these out together, reflecting on our professional practice and active learning. But all of these methods can be contextualized to any discipline, area or situation. So reflections used across pretty much every single subject discipline area. So all of these methods can be contextualized. And these could be used for ourselves to reflect as practitioners, but they could also be used to support our students if we're student facing, or our colleagues to help foster a reflective mindset and to aid that reflective process. So there's lots of opportunities to try out these methods today. So please do contribute as much or as little as you like. The slides will be shared via a link and can be accessed anytime. If you want to sit back and reflect privately, then that's absolutely fine. If you want to add lots of contributions and posts on the chat, then that's brilliant as well. It's totally up to you. And this is a very brief kind of outline. So like I said, we're going to be trying out some of these methods and then discussing the benefits of reflection and these methods and how it links to active learning. I did think, maybe we could go through, kind of switch this around. So go through the benefits first and how it links and then try out the methods. But I thought we'd almost flip the style so we can just dive straight in and try them out and then go through some of the benefits afterwards. So here are some common reflection methods, and you might have utilized some of these before to reflect yourselves, or maybe you've taught on courses where these have been maybe an assessment method or part of the course. So keeping a diary, asking questions, doing reflective writing, discussing with other people, having conversations. Introspection, so examining our own thoughts and feelings, seeking other perspectives as well. And whilst these are all very, very useful approaches, we can, some of the methods we're going to be exploring today can add on to these or can support the above and help to really instigate that reflective process coming through. So we're going to go through 3 different categories. So we're going to go through some visual stimulus, some symbolism, and then some models of reflection. And the key questions to really think about throughout are what are the benefits of reflection and why use these different creative methods as well. But also, how does reflection actually link to an active learning, an active learning approach? How are the two joined together? So firstly, we've got visual stimulus. So these are selecting certain different stimulus to represent a feeling or a thought. So it can highlight feelings, generate themes, identify barriers, and start to problem solve as well. So one of my favorite activities to do is asking for GIFs or images or emojis to represent different things. So here's a few examples of some of these which I've done over the last year. So I ran a workshop around hybrid teaching, and I asked, how would you represent this? This was one of the GIFs. Things are no longer under control, and I definitely felt like that at times. Another one was when I set breakout rooms with my students. And we've got a nice tumbleweed there. I don't know whether they were actually referring to being left alone in the room, or maybe they were referring to their students not really engaging very much, but I thought it was quite interesting. And then we've also got my students when I ask for volunteers. I absolutely love that one. And these are all really, really good examples, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of how these can actually help that reflection coming through. So with these, they start to bring up different kind of key feelings, and then we can start to find solutions and problem solve together. So, for example, the first one, so that kind of feeling of not being in control, and then we can work together as a group to start to think about solutions to that, or strategies we can put in place to ease the kind of the teaching process. Or with the breakout rooms one, that's clearly an issue with engagement. Again, how can we problem solve that as a group? So using kind of this symbolism or these kind of visual elements can really help start that reflection and that problem solving coming into place, rather than just kind of saying, what are your reflections or experiences? That can sometimes be quite difficult to answer. So we've got a very quick task, and unfortunately Zoom doesn't allow for GIFs, or at least I don't think it does. So I thought we'd do something a little bit different, which is creating an emoji story. So I'd like to ask you now, and like I said, it's totally optional, but if you can pick 3 emojis which represent you as a practitioner, and include just very, very briefly why you've chosen these. So if you go to the Zoom chat, you can then click on the little smiley face icon, and it'll bring up probably hundreds now, isn't there? They're always being added on, of emojis, and you can have a very quick look through and select 3 which would represent you as a practitioner. So I did this yesterday, and I came up with these 3 here. So I thought a big part of my role is listening and trying to support others. So I thought the ear was quite a good example there. I've chosen the plant. I see that as a very kind of developing or supporting growth. So I thought that's quite a good representation of that. And then I chose the padlock open as part of my love of problem solving and trying to kind of work together to come up with solutions. So those were the three that I went for. But I'll just pause for maybe a minute or so, just in case you would like to add a few, and Rob started us off with some interesting ones there. And yeah, if you did want to add a few which would represent you as a practitioner. And again, you might be thinking, what's kind of the benefit of this method? And again, it starts to generate different feelings and thoughts, and helps us to define our identity and what are those kind of key areas. When I was doing this yesterday, I really had to kind of think deeply, what are these kind of priorities for me in my role, and how can I represent these? So actually, even something which might seem very, kind of arbitrary or such as selecting an emojis, they can actually really instigate quite deep reflection and really start that process off. So I'm just going to pause for a second because I'm going to read through all these lovely chat messages, and we've got some very interesting ones. Amazing. Yeah, we've got such a great variety there as well, haven't we? So we've got, I'm just going to kind of pick a few out, I think, here. So Dustin, you've gone for devil's advocate and finding ideas and collaboration. Yeah, so you've gone for the book, you've gone for the kind of hands together, working together. Yeah, really, really good. Let's have a look. We've got Roger, who's gone for the dice to represent your love of games and games-based learning. Yeah, so again, really, really good. You've gone to planting seeds. Yeah, that's a really good one as well, and creating wonder. And yeah, we've got some really good answers coming in. If you can't add emojis, I think there's one or two who aren't able to. Please don't worry. You can always write it instead or describe it. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, we've got some really, really good interesting answers in there. And like I said, it really is a quite an interesting creative method to start thinking about these kind of, our professional practice or our professional identity. Okay, so let's move on. So we've got a couple of other category ones. So some visual stimulus, so storyboards, drawings, self-portraits, and these are made up of object symbols or imagery which represent key elements and events of our professional identity. So when I used to teach psychology, and this is going back quite a few years, we were talking about social identity, and I thought a really good exercise would be to create a self-portrait, and I was really blown away with some of the kind of finished products here. So here was a couple of examples that I gave, and this was one of my students' work at the bottom who they did give me permission to share. And you can see here, I mean, it's a really, really interesting drawing, and they really got a lot from this exercise, because again, it made them really consider their identity. And it might not work for every single person, and I think reflection is very individualized, what kind of works best. But for a lot of the members of the group, they found actually selecting imagery and drawing was a really much easier way to do this, rather than writing down what their identity was. So they found using this kind of visual method to be really, really helpful in that. So yeah, I was really blown away by some of the results as well. I'll just very quickly show an example from, and this was actually a session at the Global Festival of Active Learning, and this was from Alison McCandlish. And I don't know if Alison's actually here, so hi Alison if you are. But it was a really, really amazing workshop where attendees were asked to create a collage, basically based on their practice, and you can see here, and I'll share the the slides for this. Just some really, really amazing, amazing work here. And again, very, very individual, very, very helpful to develop those kind of key themes and identities. And again, just kind of thinking about what kind of the meaning of these are as well. So yeah, I thought that was brilliant, a really good example of that. Okay, so we've also got vlogging as well, so video blogging, again a really good alternative to again kind of reflective writing. So sometimes it can feel a little bit awkward sitting in front of a camera and talking, and I've tried it and I found it okay. I did feel a little bit awkward doing it. But again, for some students or practitioners, this might be a really useful way of doing it, kind of speaking rather than writing. So let's go on to category 2 now, which is all about symbolism. And this is about linking abstract concepts to particular scenarios or experiences. So this could be things like songs, films, TV, animals, colors. And I am trying to keep an eye on the chat by the way, but there's so many brilliant contributions. I'll try my best. If you do have any questions, please do add them on. And I've just seen a very quick comment from Mary who said, love the idea of metaphors, collages, visual representations. What about people who don't relate? How do you give alternative options? And I think that's a really, really good point. And I think using kind of these methods, there should always be options, and people can select how they want to represent themselves. So like I said, here we've got a few different examples, and the creating that self-portrait was really good for some students, but some students didn't engage with it as well. So there was an alternative given, such as kind of writing or vlogging or something different. So I do think alternatives should always be given, and seeing kind of what works best for them. So I'll just give a quick example of this symbolism task. So when I used to work, I used to teach the PGCE, which is a teacher training qualification in the UK. And one of the exercises I ran at the end of a trimester was to ask our trainee teachers to choose a song which represented their last trimester. So I'm going to play a few here. So hopefully you'll be able to hear these. I think you should be able to, but just bear with me for 2 seconds. So this and these were all genuine responses, and I'll talk a little bit about why they kind of selected these as well. Okay, so that was the first one. And so they chose I Will Survive. So for that one, they felt very kind of they felt very confident that they're going to finish the course. They felt very motivated. So yeah, they chose I Will Survive. So they had a really kind of positive trimester. They had some amazing lessons and feedback, and they felt very very positive. So I'll play the next one now. So those who know me knew I was going to play some kind of music here. I wasn't actually planning to until yesterday, and then it kind of happened. But here we go. Here's number 2. Okay, so then we had Don't Stop Me Now by Queen. So again, they felt they had a lot of achievements. They felt very, very motivated, and again they wanted to choose a song which represented that. So they went for that one. So we'll go for song number 3 now, which was a little bit different. Sorry, I've got to line all these up on Spotify. Here we go. I got a taste of love in a simple way, and if you need to know while I'm still standing, you just fade away. Don't you know I'm still standing better than So this person had more setbacks maybe than others, but they went for I'm Still Standing, which is, again, really, really good choice of song. They like I said, they had some setbacks, but they still felt motivated, and they still felt, you know, they're going to keep going with the course, and they you know, they're still standing. They got through it. They were resilient, and again, it brought up all these kind of feelings and emotions, and it was such a good way to represent this. I've got two more, and then so we've got one more here. So just bear with me. Sorry for whilst I line this up. With the sound of speed, machine guns ready to go. Are you ready? Hey, are you ready for this? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Out of the doorway, the bullets rip to the sound of the beat. Yeah. Another one bites the dust. So we had yet another one, Bites the Dust by Queen, and that one was around another trimester finished, one step closer to the goal. So they were really, really pleased with that. And then the last one, which I'm sorry, I just actually put that on by accident, but I'll just play this one very briefly. So that should be playing in 2 seconds. So this person was just pleased that it's the end, basically, and they were just very grateful that the trimester had ended. But again, it was such a fun task, and we made this collaborative playlist as a group. I'll just put the song titles on here, and it was such a fun way to do that. And like I said, and then what we did is, so students had a few minutes to or a bit of time to select their songs, and then they worked in groups to kind of present their songs or share their songs with other members of the group, and actually then get really kind of deep into those feelings, emotions, thoughts based on those songs, and actually can then make some kind of almost targets or kind of aims based on some of those feelings which is kind of became prevalent. So yeah, really interesting way to do it. So yeah, I thought we'd have a go at this as a group. So if you want to have a think about a recent project that you worked on, it could be anything. How would you represent this? And feel free to add a song title, or maybe you want to do a film title instead, or maybe like a TV series. And if you do want to add it to the chat and do a really quick explanation of why you've chosen this, then please do so. It would be great to hear that. I'll just pause for a minute or so just to give a little bit of time to have a think. So it can be any sort of recent project, anything you've worked on recently. Even if you just wanted to think about the last kind of few months as a whole, that would be fine as well. And then, like I said, have a think about if you can try and find a song or a film which would symbolize that, and then like I said, explain why. Okay, so I think I've been reading these. They're fantastic. We've got some such creative options here. And again, it's such an interesting method to really just bring those feelings to kind of consciousness, and we've got some really good examples. Someone's added Groundhog Day. So kind of going back some of the issues they faced in the past. Someone's put dead in the water. Catherine's gone, so the project started and fizzled out very quickly. Alice has gone to The Long and Winding Road by the Beatles. Roger's got Mission Impossible. Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, we've got some really, really good ones. I will read through all these afterwards. And again, I don't know whether that was quite easy to do, or maybe some people found it more difficult to think of something which represented an experience. But like I said, for some people, this can be a really, really helpful alternative way to do this. Yeah, we've got some amazing ones on that. So we'll go on to category 3, so our final category. And this is using models to look at scenarios and experiences from really, it's about different perspectives in a structured framework here. So I'll go through 3 very, very quickly. So we've got the mirror, the microscope and the binoculars model, Brookfield, which is all around 4 critical lenses. And then we've also got the Jelly Baby tree as well. And again, some of you might have come across some of these models before, but they're all around being able to step back and look at experiences from different perspectives in a very kind of structured way. So if we just kind of say to someone, have you thought about looking at it from this perspective, that might be quite hard and abstract to do. But if we structure it in a kind of set way, that can be really helpful. So the first one is called the mirror, the microscope, and the binoculars. I love this one, and it's looking at an experience or an experience from different lenses. So we've got the mirror, the microscope, and the binoculars. So the mirror is all around what have we learned about ourselves. So looking at ourselves in the mirror, what do we learn about our values? And this could be looking at ourselves as individuals, or it could be as team members as well. So it's reflection of the self, and the self becomes clearer. So that would be kind of stage 1. The next stage would be looking at it through the microscope, so making the small experience large. So what have I actually learned from the experience? What have we learned as a group, and how do we feel our actions have impacted the group as well? So it's again making that smaller experience larger, which is exactly what a microscope does. And then finally, we've got the binoculars, which is making that distance become closer. What did I learn as a whole? How will this actually alter my future activities or my experiences or my career plan? What about broader issues, social global problems? What can be done to change the solution? So it's bringing in that distance to closer. So again, really, really interesting model to structure that reflection from 3 different perspectives there in that format. We've got the next one, which is Brookfield, which is suggests we employ 4 critical lenses through which to view and reflect upon our practice. So I always think of this one as putting on different types of sunglasses. So yeah, I found 4, I tried to find them as different as I could, 4 different sunglasses. And this kind of model is suggesting that when we put on a different pair of lenses, we can look at things from different perspectives. So lens 1 would be ourself, so our own autobiography as teachers and learners. The second lens we put on would be our students. So what do our actual students, or maybe the stakeholders we work with, what would they think about the experience or the situation? We can put on another lens to look at our peers, so our colleagues' experiences. And then the final pair of lenses is a scholarly lens. So what would theoretical literature or current research say about the experience or the situation? So this is again a really, really helpful structured framework to help us reflect on our own practice. I'm still loving all the songs coming in, by the way. It's great. Maybe I think we've got to do a playlist, haven't we, of all of these? Absolutely. And then we've got the Jelly Baby, which or sometimes known as a blob tree. So this is a tool to help and encourage, well, it says students on here, but it could be anybody, to state where they saw themselves in terms of their current position, and to establish where they're aiming for and how to get there. And why are blobs easier than words? And you can see the tree on the right-hand side now. It kind of like we've been talking about, it's sometimes easier for some to have a visual representation and a prompt to aid that reflection. So it can help those who struggle maybe to articulate feelings and thoughts. So you can see here there's around 20 or so different blob figures, and they're all doing very different things. And yeah, I'll briefly show you how this could work in a kind of classroom experience. So we'll give that a go as well in a second, but I'll just briefly go through how this could be used. So this might be some instructions which would precursor the task. So some appear confident, happy, relaxed, others appear less content, some are giving and some are offering support. Some are alone, some are in pairs or groups, some appear solitary, others are isolated, some are part of the crowd. So these are questions which might help asking students, so thinking about kind of starting your course, what jelly baby would you have been and why? Think about the present day, what jelly baby are you currently and why? If someone else was looking at your situation, what will they choose for you? And then the last one, think about a year's time. What jelly baby would you like to be and why, and how can you get there? And again, by kind of thinking about those different feelings and emotions and then actually visually representing those, this can be a really effective way to start the reflection. And there are some quite interesting ones on there, aren't there? I thought we would, I think we've got time to give this a go. So if you have a mobile phone or a device near, you can scan the QR code, or I'll just pop the link in the chat. Catherine's identified the one soaring off the branch, which is a very devious one, isn't it? So if you want to click on that link, it should take you to a Mentimeter, and then you can, there should be a kind of a little white circle. It might be a little bit hard to find, but you can then drag it and you can select what jelly baby are you this week. So think about your week so far, which jelly baby would represent this. And what I'll do is I will just bring up some of the I'll just bring up the slides, or actually I'll keep the QR code for a second and then we'll have a look at the results in a minute. So if you wanted to engage with this, if you wanted to add it on the chat as well, that's absolutely fine. But think about your week so far, which jelly baby would represent this, and you can add it to our board here. Brilliant, yeah. So we've got a real mix actually. Really interesting. No one's chosen the saw one yet, which is great. We've got a few people look like they've had a tough week at the bottom there, kind of. So some really interesting ones. And if you wanted to add why you've chosen those ones as well on the on the Zoom chat, then you're more than welcome to. I'll just show you the results of these. So you can see here the most popular ones was here. So this one who's kind of hanging on. I guess that could mean different things, couldn't it? Maybe it's been a hard week and people are feeling like, you know, they're just trying to kind of cling on, which I can definitely resonate with. We've got people here. This one's a quite popular one, so the one swinging, people who are supporting others, or maybe looking for support as well. So yeah, we've got a real kind of range of representation here. And again, it like I said, this activity can really help kind of just bring those feelings to the surface. Okay, and let's have a quick look through the chat. So yeah, we've got lots of people doing some really good reflection there, and thank you for sharing those really interesting insights. So we'll go back to our presentation. So yeah, I'll keep the Mentimeter open, so feel free to add on to those. But another alternative would be this one as well. So this was another one by Wilson. Which blob do you feel like today? So again, lots of different figures, and again, people could think about how they're feeling, or reflecting on their practice, and again, which one represents that the best. So we've got around kind of 10 minutes or so left. So I thought the final thing we'd do today as a group would be creating our own reflective collage. So I'll give a quick, and this might not work. I don't actually know how many people are in. We've got about 90 people. So it's using a Google slide, so it might crash, but we'll give it a go. If not, it's not the end of the world. We can always do it afterwards. But yeah, apologies if it does crash. So I'm gonna share a link to a new Google slide, which you have editing access to, and you can choose a slide which is going to be a random number, So yeah, just kind of, I've made about 125 different ones. So you can just pick any one. They're all exactly the same, it's just a template. And then you can add your name and complete the sections and create your own collage. You can feel free to change the background or choose a color which represents you, or use an image and decorate it as much as you like. And I'll put a little bit of background music on just while we're doing this. So I'll just show you very quickly what this looks like. So here we go. So they're all, like I said, exactly the same. I've put the instructions as slide 1, and you can pick any slide anywhere between number 2 to 125. So just choose kind of any random number and go for that. And you might just want to wait a few seconds, check someone's not kind of editing it as well. And then there's 4 sections to complete. So first of all, you can edit. So you can just add your name. So I might say Jamie, and I might customize the background. So we can just, let's go for change background. I'm going to do a nice shade of green. And then the sections are, so using one sentence only, what's some advice you would give your former self? You can then, section 2 is add an image of your spirit animal. Section 3 is add an image or multiple images which represents you or your professional practice. And section 4, something which you hope to achieve, try out within the next 3 months. So I'm just going to share this to the chat. Like I said, anybody with the link is an editor, so you can edit it. I've just posted it in the chat, so that should be appearing in a second. And like I said, have a go at this for a few, for kind of 5, well, just till the end really. So I'm kind of between 5 and 10 minutes. Like I said, apologies if it does crash, because there will be quite a few people adding on. If you do prefer to add your answers onto the Zoom chat as well, then that's obviously absolutely fine. And like I said, you might want to choose a random number. So I can see, yeah, just go for any one which is blank. They're all the same. All you need to do is just scroll down and just choose a random one, and then you can start to edit it. I don't think I need to create any more because we've got plenty there. But yeah, like I said, I'll pause for a few minutes just to give you a little bit of time to create your reflective collage. And like I said, there's 4 sections. So you're giving some advice to your former self. You're adding an image of your spirit animal. You're adding any sort of image which represents you or your professional practice, and what's something you hope to achieve within the next 3 months. Like I also said, yeah, feel free to decorate it as well. If you did want to add an image as a background or a different color, you know, whatever works best for you. It might be worth adding your name first, just so people can see that that slide is taken. Like I said, if you do want to add responses on the chat as well, then that's absolutely fine. So what I'll do is I'll put in a little bit of I'll just put some of those songs we had before. I'll just kind of wait maybe 5 minutes or so for this, just to give you a little bit of chance to create your collages, and then we'll briefly just kind of recap, and I'll go through some final points.
Finally, it's happened to me right in front of my face.
Okay, I think we'll pause there and we'll I'm amazed by all the fantastic imagery we've got so far. I mean, these collages are immense. I think someone possibly got a bit excited and made the background purple for everybody, but that's absolutely fine. It's a nice color. And yeah, we've got some amazing contributions, and feel free to continue to add to these throughout the day, and I'll definitely keep this link open, and it'll be fantastic to look at these later on. So yeah, we'll definitely keep those open. So just a few final end points. So some of these key questions. So what are the benefits of reflection? So just kind of going back to what I asked at the beginning. So it can help us make sense of our experiences and develop meaning to these, support and challenge our own views and enable our development. It helps guide good practice and helps us become aware of the values that drive our work. Key question number 2 is why use these creative methods? And I've kind of spoke about this throughout. But like I said, they can really stimulate and structure thoughts and feelings, and those who might find it a bit more difficult through speech or words, and prompt those discussions and that problem solving, and foster a reflective mindset. And then the third key question was, how does reflection link to active learning? And I think this is probably one of the most important questions. And my answer would be, it empowers people to think and take ownership of their own learning and practice. So it's moving away from that passive learning experience to an active one. People are able to take ownership and actually really deeply reflect on their own learning experiences, and generate new knowledge and understanding themselves, and build on that existing knowledge rather than just receiving information, which is exactly what active learning really is essentially. So that's it. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you so much for all your amazing contributions, and yeah, really appreciate that. It's been so lovely to have you here, and joining along with everything, and hopefully you've enjoyed it, even if you just enjoyed the songs. I will share the slides. These ones aren't editable, by the way. So this is the main slide deck. So I will just add that on. It would be really lovely to connect with you if you found it interesting today. So I've added my Twitter and my LinkedIn on there, or you can email me if you've got any questions. I don't think it looks like we might not have time for any questions, but please do get in contact, as I'd love to connect. And then, yeah, feel free if you've got any other creative methods and tips, I always like to ask this one as a final kind of reflective question, and do feel free to add this to the chat. So what's something you're proud of? And this could be something personal or professional, but I always like to, if I'm ever kind of talking about reflection or working with colleagues, I always love to hear about something that you're proud of, something that you've achieved. And again, I always think it's a very empowering question to ask people, and you can find out a lot about people by finding out what is one thing they're proud of. So if you would like to do that, then please do add on the chat, because that would be really cool to find out. So I will stop sharing. Oh, I have put some resources and references on there as well, so everything we used today are on there. And I've also just added a very quick appendix slide, which I'm more than happy for you to share if it's useful. And it's just a very quick help sheet about reflective writing or thinking. So it's just got some key questions, some models to help, and just a few kind of tips on there, basically. So if you know anyone who would find that useful, or yourself, then please do use that. I think, Dustin, okay, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks very much. Okay. All right. So thanks very much, Jamie. The next talk is a short talk. It's Under the Bonnet. What is the value of student self-assessment in a module taking an active learning approach? Alice Shepherd. So I'll start the timer soon. Everyone has 10 minutes for these next sessions, and then there's 5 minutes of chat after. So Alice, over to you.
Thank you, Dustin. I don't know how to follow Jamie. I'm not a very visual person, as you will see from my slides, but I really enjoyed the workshop. So something totally different probably is the best way to intro my talk. I'm Alice. I teach at the University of Leeds, at Leeds University Business School. And I've got quite a lot of my colleagues on the session today, which is lovely. It's my first time at this conference. My colleagues tell me I'm an early adopter of active learning approaches, so I'll go with that label. We are on a similar journey at Leeds to a number of the universities that were mentioned in the first session. We have had collaborative teaching spaces for about 5 or 6 years now. and we are moving to more active learning approaches in the business school, and we have a wider curriculum project that's a 10-year project called Curriculum Redefined. So I will post some links about those later on. But this is actually a very early stage piece of work within my own teaching that I wanted to share and really get some perspectives on from you, if that's okay. And I wanted to ask a question first of all, and I wonder if we could just ask it and people could put the tick or the thumbs up in there, use the reactions to just answer the question. It's a yes, no question. I just wanted to get a sense of how many people out of the 100 of us on this session have used self-assessment with learners, not learners self-assessing a piece of work they've done, but learners sort of self-assessing their progress within a program or within perhaps a module of study. So if you have used self-assessment in that way, could you give me a thumbs up or a green tick? Dustin, are you able to see the whole panel of everyone? I'm not sure I can see it. Okay, I'm just having a quick look through. So I have
9 ticks.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it isn't something that I had used, and I've not seen a massive literature about it. So thank you for giving me a sense of that within the room. So let me tell you a bit about the context for this self-assessment. And I'll give a shout out to Freddie Butchko, who's on the session today. Freddie is the learning technologist that I worked with on redesigning the module. And he helped me to get this self-assessment working with the students. So I teach a final year undergraduate module, Contemporary Issues in Accounting, or What Keeps Chief Financial Officers Awake at Night. And it's quite a large module. It's compulsory for all the accounting students, and it's an option for some other students as well. I've been teaching the module for 3 years now, but this year I redesigned it with Freddie as what we call a flagship module. That's part of a program in the business school of moving towards more active learning approaches. We've done that for about 10 modules so far. So it was a very deliberate blend of online pre-workshop activities, a 90-minute classroom workshop in a collaborative teaching space with the students working in small groups, and then some post-workshop activities to extend what they were doing in the classroom. In terms of assessment, where they were headed, it was an open book online exam this year, and there was a formative assignment at the Easter break. So this was semester 2, so we had the Easter break in the middle of the course. So what got me interested in the whole concept of self-assessment of progress rather than self-assessment of a piece of work? I think 2 literatures have come together for me. The first one is this quite interesting literature about student perceptions of active blended learning and possibly linkage to the consumerist narratives that dominate UK higher education, and I know higher education in some other countries as well. So, you know, this aspect of, well, I expect somebody to be standing there and telling me what I need to know. And I was very conscious that that's not at all what I was going to do in this module. The other stream of literature that I became interested in was from the Hong Kong teacher education context, and it's all about self-assessment of progress rather than self-assessment of a piece of work. So I was interested in the potential for that. I was quite conscious in this module that the students would have 15 hours of contact time, but there were 100 hours of study time for the module, so 85 hours of individual study time. I could give guidance about how I thought students could use that study time without being overly prescriptive, but really I don't know what's going on under the bonnet. It's kind of hidden from me. I knew from past experience that there was a tendency to leave assessment preparation late. This is final semester, final year. There are a lot of other deadlines. There's a final year project going on at the same time as this module. So I wondered whether there was value in asking students to just stop and reflect on how things were going at the midpoint of this module. So what Freddie enabled me to do was set up a small survey. It had 6 questions. This was optional for students to complete, but I did talk about what I felt it might do for them if they did complete it. I didn't want to stop students from completing the survey, but not taking part in my research if they didn't want to submit their data for my research. I totally understood that. So there was an option to do it for their own benefit, but not to their data not to be included in what I'm going to talk about in the rest of this talk. It opened at the halfway point in the module and was open for a little while. The 6 questions, depending on how the students answered the questions, I'd written different sets of feed forward about my advice for the second half of the module based on how they'd answered those 6 questions. And I was very deliberate about saying to the students that I would not see their responses. They were for themselves to reflect on and think about and use the feedback. I didn't want them to answer in the way that they thought they should, in the way that they thought I might expect. So I made it very clear to them that I wouldn't see their responses until after I'd marked their final assessments. So let me give you an example of one of the questions. So what do you feel your biggest priority is in your revision for this module? And there were 3 possibilities that they could answer there. Based on how they answered, this is a summary of the sort of feed forward. It was fuller than this, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the sorts of pieces of advice I was giving them. And you can see there were slightly different pieces of advice based on how the students had answered that question. So what did I find? What did I find from the student responses for this sort of pilot year of this self-assessment? I had 14 fully completed surveys that had the research consent. So not a great response rate, but fairly typical in a large cohort. Interestingly, none of the non-accounting students completed it. And I think that's potentially quite interesting. I asked them to assess how they felt about their progress compared with how they expected at the beginning of the module. They were quite hard on themselves in general. There were anxieties about whether they felt they had spent enough time, but interestingly, they weren't always linked. The amount of study time they had spent was not always linked to how they felt about their progress on the module. I asked a question about whether people studied in their independent study time, whether they studied alone or in a study group. I didn't ask them to set up study groups, but I was aware that they formed organically. Interestingly, none of the respondents were studying in a group outside class. I wonder whether that is the impact of COVID on bonding within the cohort. I asked them about their revision priorities, and quite a lot of it was about kind of structure and mastery of the content rather than evolving their writing. Interesting, because I was spending quite a lot of time in class on critical writing. And some similar responses on what they wanted to spend the rest of their study time on. All of the students who completed the self-assessment passed the module, and their mean mark was slightly higher than the cohort overall. So I thought you might be interested in how accurate the students' predictions of their self-assessment, of their assessment performance were. So most did predict exactly how they would perform, bearing in mind there were final year, final semester students, so probably had a good sense of where they were. A few over predictions and some under predictions as well. It's a very small study, I'm fully aware. And I was concerned in getting those findings that I might be getting the worried well completing the self-assessment. So I think next year I will build it into classroom time. And I will also ask the students to give me feedback on the helpfulness of that self-assessment, perhaps a little bit later on after the midpoint. I think the timing this year, I might move the formative assignment a bit earlier so that the students feel like they have more to go off when they do their self-assessment, but still enough time to kind of change their strategies before the final assessment. There were no specific comments on the module evaluation about the self-assessment, but the feedback was very positive about the module design and the learning journey and the sorts of active learning approaches we were taking. And a very typical cohort in terms of module performance. So there's nothing particularly unusual about this cohort in terms of module performance. So I just want to put my references, I'll just leave my references slide up, but I'm really intrigued by any thoughts or comments that anybody has about this sort of exercise and potentially how to take this forward.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Justin says
twice.
question time. Yeah, I'm happy. I'm also happy if it's not comments, if it's questions, I'm absolutely happy to answer any of those. I've got some raised hands I can see. Yeah, shall I stop sharing and then I'll be able to see all of those? Yeah, so I'm not sure whose hand was first. I've got Andrew and Louise. So shall we go with Louise first and then Andrew? Andrew's nodding, so you're up, Louise.
Thanks, Andrew. I don't know if it was us, it would have been a fist fight. No. Thanks for that, Alice. Yeah, I used self-assessment in my final module this year, which is PG Cert for teachers. So it was a kind of a check-in because I only do 3 sessions. There's a lot of independent learning and they can do it on their own time, etc. So I did what Canvas, our VLE, calls a check-in survey. So I asked them just very simply, rate your level of understanding on the topics and then free text, and allowed them to do to expand on that and what they would like me to go over. So I was using it mainly as a tool of, right, we have one final session, what extra resources or how do I need to change what I'm going to cover? So I was just interested in your abstract, and apologies if I missed it in your slides, but your abstract says something like you gave them generic feedback. So obviously you didn't see how they answered. So was it just a kind of pre-built response depending on how they answered?
Yes, I said to Freddie that Freddie will recognize this. I felt like it was one of those books that, I don't know if people, I'm showing my age now, I had them as a child, where you went through the story and then depending on what you wanted, you then went to another page and then there was another set of, it was a little bit like that. So it was kind of nested. There were lots of sets of generic feedback, but what the students got depended on how they'd answered the earlier questions. But yes, Louise, you're absolutely right. I wrote that without having obviously seen their responses, but I think I can probably refine that based on some of the overall module feedback from last year, rather than the self-assessment responses from last year.
Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, I put a comment in the chat there, but I read what you was. By the way, I thought what you've done and the methodology and the findings are absolutely excellent and exactly what we need. And I'm thinking, goodness, could I run your research method somewhere around my own practice? I think it's really useful. But my point was, I think I heard that a lot of the students were focused on the mastery of content. And really, the rationale behind your research seemed to be around the value of being in community and the broader learning outcomes associated with an active approach to learning. Yeah, and you're nodding. So that's interesting. And I suppose, my comment in the chat was, I think what you found sort of reminds us that our challenge is about how we communicate the value of being together and those indirect benefits of learning through a collaborative experience. But anyway, I don't know if you have anything further to say on that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think, and it resonates with what was being said in the early presentations from Glasgow and Coventry today. We have the spaces, we have to a certain extent quite a lot of focus and emphasis on the staff development, but we don't necessarily always have the students with us. And I think at Leeds, it's an interesting shift. We've been going along this for a while now. It feels a bit like a snowball at Leeds. It's building up and it's becoming bigger and it's becoming an institutional umbrella. But I still think it's interesting. My students are of a particular nature because of my discipline, I would argue. They tend to be very, very focused. And this is a stage in their professional development, which they will go on, a lot of them, to further professional qualifications. So this almost feels quite a transitory stage at university. I think one thing I didn't say is I've already got an existing relationship with the vast majority of these students. And I think it was probably only possible to get them to do the things I wanted them to do because they had that innate trust in me, and I explained and unpacked why I'd chosen this particular sort of framework and why I'd made some of the design decisions that I make. And to my knowledge, that's not something that people often feel comfortable doing. I guess I did feel comfortable doing that. But I agree, there is still, I think, some mismatch of I just want to come and get the stuff. And I do hear that. It's interesting in the module evaluation. It was quite a different there was a lot about, I liked how she pushed us in this class, and I found the benefit, but I think that took time. And so this self-assessment was sort of 5 weeks in. I think actually by week 10, a lot of them had sort of gone, the light bulbs, I saw the light bulbs go on in the classroom. So I think there's interesting questions about timing of when you ask them about things. I still wanted it to be early enough that they could feel like they could change something in their study module, but I think it's quite a delicate balance about giving students enough time to kind of feel their way, but then also wanting to know how is it going. And I agree with you, Louise, potentially adjust things based on that. Not I couldn't do that because I didn't see the responses deliberately here, but I think with other exercises that you do, I think that's quite important, but I think it's a very delicate balance.
Okay, thanks very much, Alice.
Thank you.
Sorry to cut you off. The next one
it's okay, we have to move on. Thank you very much, everyone.
Next one is using walking in virtual tours to develop teamwork by Zubaida Loughton and Alison McCandlish at University of Glasgow. So if you guys would like to share your screens, I'll start the timer.
Thank you very much, Dustin. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Zubaida Loughton, and this is a joint presentation by myself and my colleague Alison McCandlish, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. In the short presentation, I will discuss the use of walk-in and virtual quiz tours to develop teamwork and active learning outside of the classroom. So just to run through the presentation outline for today, I'll be going through the purpose of the presentation, talking through the active learning steps that we followed. We'll be going to an engagement activity and then returning for our personal reflections on active learning. And then we'll go back to another engagement activity and then finally ending with the Q&A. So just to go through the purpose of the presentation for today, there's main 3 reasons for it. So the first being to develop, the first being to develop inclusive practices and to encourage active learning starting from outside the classroom. The second one being to share our personal reflections on the trial use of student-led walking quiz tours and virtual quiz tours of surrounding neighborhoods in Glasgow with the 2021
Zubaida?
Yes?
Sorry, I think we still see your first slide. I don't know if...
Oh, okay, just hang on.
This happens, it's normal, so...
Right, can you see the purpose?
No, it's still on the first slide.
Still on the first slide, okay.
It's like the screen may be frozen.
You probably should share, Zubaida.
Okay, let me do that. Right, so let's try this again. Okay, so taking a minute, I think something froze.
What I would do is maybe just, someone clear things to swap the view or just manually change the slides. That can also help. Sometimes if you can't do a presentation.
Okay, so let me try this once again. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's okay. That's good.
The purpose, right?
Yeah,
okay. So the final purpose is then just to encourage attendees to think more broadly about how peer interaction between local and international students can be encouraged, particularly outside of the classroom. So now in terms of the active learning steps that we followed, these are divided according to the student-led walking quiz tours and the virtual quiz tours. So the main purpose of the student-led walking quiz tours was about information seeking and to get students to integrate and learn more about the surrounding neighborhoods within Glasgow. So for us to manage the actual process, we used student sign-up sheets, and we were able to gauge how many students were interested, and that then informed how many students we were able to divide up into groups. And because of COVID, we decided to use Microsoft Teams to develop the quiz. And so this also ensured that one member of the team would be completing the quiz and that the rest of the students would still be engaging with each other. Teams was really useful in being able to have the bigger group where all students would know each other, but also smaller groups to manage students assigned to a particular walking route. So what we also did is we had photo sharing opportunities, and we encouraged students along particular parts of the walking route to take photos with each other or based on the scenery, and share it on Teams and also share it on the departmental social media pages. What we did as well is, because this was part of an informal introduction, we had the opportunity after the walk for students to meet their program directors face to face. And this was also just another way for students and staff to get involved and get to know each other. In terms of the virtual quiz tours, again, it was about information seeking, but this time it was more directed towards one particular neighborhood. So instead of having it staff-led, student-led, this was staff-led because staff needed to manage the process and the time. Because we used Zoom, it was a useful tool, but the staff needed to make sure that we stuck to time. And also when it came to the icebreaker, the larger group, we decided to use Mentimeter, specifically asking students to pinpoint on a map where in the world they were joining us from. And this was more just encouragement so that students could actually see how international the group is, and also get a sense of who was part of the cohort and also their group. We then decided to use breakout rooms, and we decided to keep it quite small, so maximum of 6 students, so that in the breakout room, students had an opportunity to reintroduce themselves to each other. We then provided instructions with the link to the virtual quiz, to the virtual tour, so students were able to watch the tour together and then discuss what it is that they learned about a new neighborhood without actually being based in Glasgow. And then after that, they returned to the main session where we used Mentimeter to develop the actual quiz, and students were able to then individually answer questions, engage just how much they've learned. And this was just a more fun activity about thinking about the neighborhood, the area, without just tying it to the educational aspect. So for us, it was more important about balancing the physical and the virtual, so that students had an opportunity to attend either or. If they were based in Glasgow, but due to COVID preferred virtual, they had this option available to them. We were really inspired by the hybrid and blended learning approach. So this is what really got us thinking more about how do we incorporate this. Okay, so this is the first engagement activity. If I can ask you all to please go on to Mentimeter. I've included in the chat as well the link to Mentimeter, and you can also use the QR code. Basically, with this one, I'm just asking you to, sorry, where's my screen? I'm just asking you to rank according to preference, which which active learning activity you are most interested in trying. So I can see quite a few people already starting to vote. And so you'll see I included one that is the student-led walk-in and virtual quiz tours, but then there's also an option of the student-led walk-in and virtual campus scavenger hunt. So something just interesting for students to see. And then also social networking and mixing activity, where it would be a good idea to also have staff involved. And then the last one is a staff-led social field work related to the discipline. So we still want to have the social aspect, but also integrate the aspect of, look, you are going to get to know students better, and hopefully within the classroom, you'd be able to discuss more and be at an opportunity where you're in the classroom and you're not looking at a bunch of strangers. And so to foster this engagement between students during the class. So that is, I'm going to still leave this open, but I am going to go back to my final slide. So while the votes are still going on, I'd just like to share some of our personal reflections on active learning, specifically in terms of the walk-in and virtual quiz tours. So while there is a lot for us to be able to comment on, we decided to keep it to 3 main points. So the first being an introduction to student life at the University of Glasgow. And the reason this is so important is because part of the induction process, we wanted active learning to be at the foreground, and we wanted students to already be part of this whole process. So while there are a lot of informal and formal introductions, these can include introductions to the city that students are living in, whether they're local or whether they're international students. Many students may not even be familiar with the area, even if they are local. Also, informal introductions to other students, to your program directors, as well as other staff, so you can get to know some familiar faces. This then, of course, leads to the development of learning communities, and it's also an opportunity for both international and domestic students to socialize. The next part of our reflection is based on context, so safety, security, and uncertainty. And this is where a risk assessment was really part of our process to ensure that there was support from the university. Also, a big consideration, because this was during 2021, COVID prevention and spread was at the forefront of all our decisions, because this really impacted on the size of the groups and also limited peer-to-peer interaction during the walk-in quiz tour activity. And of course, personal safety. So we had to ensure that we designed this as a group activity where students felt safe, and also that it would take place in well-lit areas. The final one is accessibility, specifically accessibility in terms of physically and digitally. And one of the things we realized is that we had to ensure that the quiz questions were answerable in both the virtual and the physical environment. So making sure that when we say look at the spot, that you can actually see it when we are conducting the virtual quiz. Making it also clear what the starting point for each tour is, because students are new, so you don't want them to all get lost. Even though we have them in groups and said they should design, or they should decide which areas they wanted to visit. We also made sure that it was accessible by multiple modes of public transport, and that distances for each walking route was familiar or made known to the students, simply because they needed to know how long and how far they would be walking. And lastly, it was about inclusivity. So my final slide is just another Mentimeter, and this one is based on your preferred activity. how will you implement this in your context? And I'd like to invite you to type the answer in Mentimeter. And I will be leaving this open as well. So you'll be able to continue to answer throughout while the presentations are going on, and you can also go back and forth. And it's great. I'd like to reflect on these. And if anyone has any other questions or comments, that would be absolutely helpful. Because at the end of this, the goal is to write a paper. And so that will be coming out soon.
Okay, we have maybe time for just maybe 1 or 2 questions, just so that we don't go over to lunch too much.
Yeah.
So if anyone has a question, just raise your hand or maybe put it in the chat, and then Zubeida can have a look at it. Okay, if there are no questions, I guess, Zubeida, you'll share these slides in the presentation with everyone so that they'll have a look.
Well, I
in their own
definitely
time.
will. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very
And I'll
much.
stop sharing.
I think the virtual tours was a good idea because students live in different places. They're not always able to come to campus and be in one space unless they have the privilege of a campus university. And even then they might live in town, like in Lancaster. So the next talk is Amy Stickles and Anna Tranter, co-creation, gamification, and student engagement. So if you guys want to go ahead and start. Thank you, Zubeida.
Hi, I'm hoping you're able to see my screen. Is that okay?
Yes.
Brilliant. I'm just going to find the screen share. Why is it not letting me do that? I'm not entirely sure. We'll just have to work it through as is, I think. Okay, actually. So my name is Amy Stickles, and my colleague Anna Tranter and I will be talking about co-creation, gamification, and active student engagement in lessons. We're aware this is the hunger slot, as I want to call it, and therefore we're competing with rumbling tummies for the next 15 minutes, but we'll do our best to try and keep you entertained, I hope.
Now, imagine a world where education sounds something like this.
Oh, did you mean to have sound in the video?
Oh.
Yeah, you have to share the sound from your.
Oh
your
dear, never
computer as
mind.
well.
Well, in essence, rather than that, she's sort of falling asleep. Sorry, Anna.
So yeah, if you know that Charlie Brown clip, it's just like no, 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 no. So, and that sometimes is what we think education sounds like for some of our students. We teach international students.
There we go. So for many of our international students who come to the UK, they often come from a teacher-centred didactic education model. At least that's true of the students that we teach on the Warwick International Foundation Year programme. And so part of our job is to help them to become more active, independent learners and to become perhaps a little bit more actively engaged with their learning than Peppermint Patty was. So at the start of this academic year, Anna and I began experimenting with introducing a bit more gamification in the classroom to encourage them to be a little bit more active.
Now, if we think about gamification, we probably all use gamification in our everyday lives. Maybe it's just even collecting loyalty points for our coffees. Maybe you track the number of steps you do or your fitness achievements. So we thought, actually, can we use gamification in education? And it's not new, is it? I know other people have used it before, and it helps with motivating people, helps with engagement. And we thought we actually can improve the learning for our students.
To begin with, we looked at quizzing, and so we used a variety of quizzes, and I do encourage you in the chat to put up other types of quiz apps that you've used, particularly any that might support some of the research as we talk about it further on as it develops. So we're using them synchronously, both online and face-to-face. It was term one when we were still a bit more of a hybrid learning environment. We were using Microsoft Forms, Kahoot, Vevox. Students didn't particularly like Microsoft Forms and Vevox, I have to say. They found those a little bit less exciting, should we put it like that? But there'll be lots of others that you will have used, I'm sure, and that we'd be interested to hear more about. But we focus more on Kahoot.
Now, we started using these quizzes And we were thinking actually, well, what are students learning from doing this? Are they enjoying it? What's that student experience like? We also wondered actually, are students getting bored of us using quizzes? Like Amy said, we were using a variety of them, but actually, were they working? Were they achieving what we wanted them to achieve? Was everyone joining in? And if not, why not? And there was also a question in our minds about anonymity. If students were not using their names, why were they not using their names? Was it about loss of face? Do we need to address that? How could we use quizzes better?
The first thing we did then after the Kahoot quizzes was just a simple questionnaire. And despite the fact we thought that students weren't always taking part, they at least perceived themselves as taking part, should we put it like that, with most of them claiming that they either always or mostly took part in the activities. And the reasons why was actually because it was game. I love games, it's good, sorry, it's fun, it's lit. I'm too old to know what that means. But essentially they were engaging and finding it a really enjoyable learning experience.
We also thought initially that maybe it's to do with language ability, or maybe it's to do with gender. But what we found from doing our first questionnaire is actually there was no difference in terms of language ability, bearing in mind all our students are international students, the majority are learning in a second language. There was no difference in language ability, no difference between genders within our classes.
So after the questionnaire, we thought, okay, that's great, but there's got to be more to it. Okay, given a quiz, there's not really much to it, surely. And so we started to think a little bit more about how we could give a bit more power to students, to give them a bit more ownership, to get them to increase their active engagement with the learning, and to hopefully improve the depth of their knowledge and understanding of the topics.
Which led us down the path to thinking about co-creation. How could we use co-creation with these quizzes? We wanted to empower the students. We wanted students to be creative, to develop their own quizzes. And by developing their own quizzes, developing their own questions, they need to actually understand that theory, don't they, to actually write good questions. And we challenged them to actually write the best questions they could do and working with us to create those quizzes.
So what did we do then? So at this time, our students were having asynchronous pre-recorded lectures that they were watching outside of lessons. And then they come into our seminars and we give them post-it notes, hence the slide in front of you. And we asked the students to write their own quiz questions. We would then collect those in and we would then upload them on, or we type them into Kahoot essentially and create the quiz from the questions the students had offered. We would also sometimes add in some of our own, so the co-creative element, but it was mostly the students and the students' questions and the students' answers. Over time, those questions became better in terms of the quality of the actual questioning. Bearing in mind these are second language learners, and so actually it was a good process for them to learn how to write good questions in English. And we also set little challenges. Who today can write the most challenging question that is correct, but the fewest people in the room can get right? And I have to say, one of my students was delighted when only one person in the room could actually answer his question. It was an absolute terror. So following this, then we wanted to know a bit more from the students about how this would work. And we therefore went to a focus group with about 10 students in the end to find out what they thought of all of this.
We asked them about being anonymous. You know, what did they feel about being anonymous? About half of them wanted to use their own name. They thought actually we're taking it seriously, and maybe this is the background that our students have come from, that actually they wanted the name, they wanted that pressure, but if you like, they were bringing that pressure on themselves to be able to answer the questions and to do better. Interesting enough, half of them wanted to be able to use other names, and we never had told them they had to use the names. And they like the fun element to that. They like actually coming up with new ideas. They like guessing who was who within the group. And as one student said there, they like revealing themselves at the end, a bit like the Masked Singer. So if you know Kahoot, you get the leaderboard, and we might say, well, okay, who's first? You know, this person's first, who is it? And everyone would look round and the student would be able to say, yeah, it's me. And they liked that enjoyment and being able to reveal themselves. And so that flexibility, I think, is important.
What are the things the students like about it? Well, actually, it was the gamified elements of Kahoot they particularly enjoyed. So in Kahoot, you have this interactivity. The question comes up, it's a mobile phone app, and you press a button, you press a part of your screen on your mobile phone, and it will then put the answers into it. students telling us actually it's playing games. They quite like playing games because they felt it was the best way to learn, so active engagement again. They also like the competitive elements. Now, some of our students don't like competition, but what we found interesting was that actually they quite liked being able to compete and to see themselves as the best. And this linked in with the leaderboard. Now you can see an image on the bottom right-hand screen there of what a Kahoot leaderboard looks like. You get points essentially for A being correct, but B being the fastest finger first, to quote Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And the students found that quite motivating. So after each question, you then get where you are on the leaderboard, and they can see themselves going up and down, and it tells you how many correct streaks you've got, or who's hot on fire and who's moving up the leaderboard quickly. And they liked that. They found that very motivational and kept them wanting to keep going.
We asked them why do they like it, and it was about that game. It was the fact that actually they felt actually under pressure. They felt that their brains were working. It reminded them of what they needed to improve. One student said, a bit like it's addictive. They actually look forward to those lessons. They came into those lessons. I kind of got them into a routine. So it was a kind of a Friday afternoon. They all came in, they took the coats off, they got ready for the quiz, and they were ready and waiting. They liked that routine, they said. 'Cause again, we were worried about the fatigue at the beginning, but actually that wasn't the case. They liked that routine. They liked being able to do the quizzes. And for me as a teacher, it was a good start to the lesson. It was a good way of recapping what we'd done in the previous lessons.
What also came through the focus group was this idea of students as co-creators. So as one student said here, and I won't read out all of these quotes, but we're creating, not just learning. So students feeling like they can be an active part of the creation of the educational environment. The other quote that stood out for us enormously is the one at the bottom here. And this came from a student from China who said, it's more like a quiz if we write our own questions. So, and by quiz, he also meant that it was a bit more fun. Otherwise, it's like a test, particularly with my educational background. So writing the questions gave them a part to play, but it also was more quiz-like and more fun. If I write the questions and it's the teacher giving the quiz, actually, it's more like a test, and I've now got to prove myself. And that changed the kind of power dynamic to a certain extent.
What really surprised us was the sense of community that doing this created. I've just seen one of the questions in the chat. Using Kahoot in lectures, I've done that before, didn't really work, but within the seminar group, because there was a small number, there was about 15 of them, it actually brought them together as a community. They like feeling part of that lesson. They like seeing each other's questions. They like that big reveal. They like writing the questions sometimes together, sometimes their own, trying to outdo each other, as Amy said, writing the best question.
The only other thing we want to just sort of put a caveat to, really, apart from things like technology, is about inclusion. So these are second language learners predominantly. And so with Kahoot, you can set particularly how long you leave the question up for and how long it takes to respond. Now, time to read, perhaps translate it in your own head, understand, and then respond was an issue for some of our students. And so it's experimenting with the reading time, but also with the question length. And this is perhaps where the co-creation aspect comes in terms of sometimes needing to moderate perhaps some of the questions that were coming. Sometimes the timings can give pressure, as that student says here, makes them a little bit more nervous, a bit more anxiety, although for some that also then fed into the fun element and the sort of the quizzing element and the gamified element. But as I say, because these are second language learners and all of our students on our course are, there were times where we needed to ensure that questions were worded in a way that students found accessible. And there were comments also in the questionnaire earlier in the year about making sure that that it's as clear as possible and as simple as possible when it came to the writing of the questions.
I think just as a summary, just to finish off here, the interactive games work really well for students, but also for tutors, because we saw the questions, we knew then students were understanding the concepts we were trying to get across, or maybe they weren't, so we could do further work on that. The co-creation, again, added an extra element to that. And we felt that actually students were learning more, and the students felt they were learning more because, again, they had to understand the concepts to be able to write the questions. And that engagement, that collaboration really built that sense of community. And from presentations earlier on, we know how important that belongingness within the classroom is.
If you want to know more, please please feel free to contact us. You can also find me on LinkedIn. In particular, if you know of any quiz apps where the students can actually submit them directly themselves, because obviously there was a sort of extra time element for us as staff in terms of taking in the questions to then put them into something like Kahoot, and that would be really, really helpful and might save us an awful lot of time next year when it comes to continuing with this work. But thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions before we go to lunch? I have concerns about the leaderboard element of Kahoot. Do you feel students feel frustrated that they aren't at the top? Well,
I think, can I answer that? Because I've used Kahoot, like I say, in lectures. And yes, talking to students after that, they've not wanted to be part of that because they felt they can't win because there's so many of them. But actually in a small group, they felt actually that they could have a go, and because they'd written the questions, maybe that gave them more confidence about it. So to me, Kahoot worked within the smaller groups, but not so well within the larger groups. I don't know if Amy's got anything to add to that.
No, I think I've said it all. I'm just having a quick read of some of the questions in the chat. So he's asked about examples of the questions. So I teach philosophy on the International Foundation Programme, and Anna teaches marketing and organisational behaviours, are two very, very different disciplines. So to begin with, a lot of the students were writing questions that were more fact-based, so knowledge-based. Who said X? And then you'd have to, 4 different names of philosophers, and it was that sort of question. As they started to get more used to it, we found they were actually writing more application questions, which again interested us in terms of it wasn't just about memorizing knowledge. This is now about application knowledge. So using X theory from the lecture, which of these would be the correct response to this question? And then you might have 4 answers. Now, of course, that then added to the difficulty I've mentioned earlier in terms of the reading time, but really interesting that the students themselves were then setting themselves more challenging questions as it went through. But to begin with, it was more knowledge and understanding as they became more familiar with the platform. And I hope that gives you an idea as to what sort of things people were up, the sorts of questions that students were asking.
But I think that's partly because of the competition element that we tried to introduce in the who can write the best questions. So they were writing more application questions because they wanted praise from the teacher, maybe to say that was a good question, but also to say, hi, that was my question and nobody got it right. So that kind of brought a different element into it, I think.
and I was just going to add, not to co-opt, it depends on how you set up your course in the first few days. If you make it competitive, they will always be competitive. If you want to decolonize your classroom, you can take out the element of competition, which capitalism loves, and make them more collaborative.
Good point. Thank you.
Anyway, if there's no more questions or comments, will you share the slides, I guess, as well?
Yes, I've already sent them on, so hopefully they'll be emailed out to people.
Okay, good. I think that's it. It's time for lunch.